Well, today is the last day of the two-day Cabinet Lekgotla, which kicked off at the Sefako Makgatho Presidential Guesthouse in Pretoria yesterday. Government leaders, including ministers, deputy ministers, premiers, director generals, and the leadership of the South African Local Government Association are meeting to deliberate on government's priorities for this year. Now, this Cabinet Lekgotla comes just after the ANC NEC Lekgotla, which ended on Monday. To talk a little bit more about this, we are joined by Modidima Mannya to give us a little bit more about it. Great to have you. Thanks very, very much, Mr. Mannya, for being with us on Morning Live.
Good morning.
Yeah. What are your expectations ahead of this Cabinet Lekgotla?
Look, the normal purpose of the Cabinet Lekgotla in the main is to prepare for the state of the nation and to set the agenda for the year. And that usually would follow what decisions were taken by the ruling party Lekgotla. But this is a bit of a unique one because it takes place within the context of the concluded National Elective Conference of the ANC. There are major issues facing the country now. We know that the president couldn't go to the World Economic Forum. We know that there are issues of load shedding. We know that there's a lot of contestation by civil society of a number of government policies. We know that there's a lot of litigation around a number of things which relate to government policy. So you expect that the government, in addition to dealing with what the ruling party has directed must be done, will also focus specifically on the immediate irritations that are faced by the people, bearing in mind that we are almost 16 months away from a national election.
Indeed, and there are a lot of issues facing South Africans right now. One of the issues, and I mean, let's just talk to the talk of the size of our cabinet. You know, the size of our cabinet has always been under discussion and always been something that people have said that it is too big, and questions arise about the role and effectiveness of deputy ministers. Even before we get to why there are deputy ministers in some cases, the size of the cabinet, I'm hoping, and I'm sure along with a lot of other people, this is going to be a big consideration of the president. Or do you think not a chance?
Well, look, the president did hint. Remember, there was a review of state-owned enterprises with a view to alignment, to trimming down. And I think there was, as you correctly say, there was talk of the size of the cabinet. But, you know, the cabinet is determined by the president, that he's got that constitutional prerogative. It should naturally reflect what he wants to achieve. The size for me is less, matters less, but the question of the efficiency and the functionality of the state as a whole becomes very important. Now, it's not just about the size, but it's also about who is in cabinet. You will recall that during the elective conference, some of the members of the cabinet pointedly said that the president is incapable and must be removed. So the question is, what have they been doing? In terms of the Constitution, the president exercises the executive authority with members of the executive. Now, it's going to be very interesting to see how he not only deals with the size, but deals with those who believe that he's not capable of being head of state.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose a lot would argue with you about, you know, the size of the cabinet. The size of the cabinet just increases that bill, that wage bill, more and more and more, and they be just more and more people dependent on these big salaries with huge perks. And this is the reality. I mean, you know, these are things that South Africans watch on and think, okay, you're getting all of this, but what are you doing for us? And that's a question they're always asking. But here is the reality is that Cabinet at the moment, there are a few vacancies that need to be filled by the president. I mean, we know that Cabinet Lekgotla, who left Public Service Administration, that's a position that's currently being occupied by Labour Minister Tula Sinezi in an acting position. Also, Fikile Mbalula is expected to leave his position as Transport Minister. What's your speculation on that? Also, I mean, we saw Paul Mashitile has been signed in. I think he's now an MP in Parliament. That was done yesterday. And there's speculations on Sihle Zekelala and expectations about an anticipated reshuffle. There is a lot coming in these days. So perhaps you want to dwell on that for a bit.
Yes, certainly. But, you know, as you know, there are changes across political parties. the EFF has recalled a number of its members of parliament following the provincial conferences. The ANC will have the same situation. New people will go in, other people will go out, and one can actually expect more to leave and more to go in. You remember the last cabinet reshuffle under Mr. Zuma, major cabinet reshuffle. Some of the ministers left after they were not retained in cabinet. My expectation, obviously, is that Mr. Mashatile, as the deputy president of the ANC, will most likely become the president, the deputy president of the country. I think that has been the case, and I mean, we have heard whether Mr. Mabuza has resigned or not, but the reality, as we know, is that Mr. Mashatile is likely to be the deputy president. And of course, you would have seen that Mr. Pakstau from Gauteng has left to join the National Assembly. And I mean, that might be telling you something about where he's going to as well.
Yeah. And certainly Didi Mabuza, I mean, our deputy president, I know he sent in an apology for missing the Cabinet Lekgotla that's taking place at the moment. He's saying it's due to a family bereavement. But I mean, is this just the sign that he's out, Didi Mabuza? I mean, I don't think he's showing any willingness to want to continue in the ranks.
Well, look, ideally, I would have preferred to have a cabinet reshuffle first before you have the Cabinet Lekgotla, because I think the one question is those who are currently members of the executive who may not be retained if there's a cabinet reshuffle, and they would have been part of these decisions. Then you have got a new team of people coming in, having to familiarize themselves with what discussed at the Lekgotla. So whilst it's a collective effort, but I think you have a point there that people might be saying, look, I'm going, why bother? But I think we shouldn't underplay the fact that we may be having a family bereavement, and we must be compassionate in that respect.
You mentioned also the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa. I mean, quite a few people in the president's cabinet have told the president himself that he has not been effective. Phumulo Masualle, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, Lindiwe Sisulu are just some of those names that have voiced their lack of confidence in the president while they still serve at his behest. Where does that leave their relations? I mean, could there still be trust and a healthy relationship there?
Well, you know, there are two things. As you know, for instance, Mr. Sulu had, subsequent to the ANC conference, written a letter to say, you know, it's over now, it was a campaign process, let's move on. But, you know, for me and you, the statements remain, and we're starting to wonder, why would people who serve in the cabinet who take decisions with the president only when the term of office of the presidency in the ANC ends, then we are told that he's ineffective. What is that supposed to mean? But this whole thing played out in a rough manner in the public domain. The president's authority involves his moral authority. And if his own ministers question his moral authority, they are actually saying he's not constitutionally fit to run as to head the state. And I think it's going to naturally have an impact on the relationships that are there. I think there's a difference between people campaigning against him, but I think these were pointed and very serious allegations. Yeah. If you remember, one of the things he was accused of is the issue of load shedding, which is now an albatross around the neck of the cabinet as we speak.
Yeah. One final question as I let you go. I mean, I know that people are angry and South Africans are angry. And when we look at national government, I suppose the question is, what effectiveness is there of national government in seeing to service delivery and supporting municipalities, which truly have been collapsing at a very high rate? What should be the role of a minister and the national government? I mean, as well as COGTA in this case.
Yes, you must bear in mind that while people have got powers, the president has got powers, cabinet and ministers have got powers, MECs and mayors and municipal councils, they are all constrained because whatever actions you take must be within the framework of the law. But I think what is interesting in today's time that you go to for money, which is wholly led by the ANC, and there's chaos there. But you see the chaos in Tshwane, which is a coalition. You'll see that we are in the third mayor in Johannesburg. There There are just many changes happening across the board. The Mangaung, for instance, I think the ANC Secretary General has indicated that they need to replace the mayor. Now, one of the things that I think Cabinet will have to deal with is how the effective coordination between the various spheres of government and also coordination that undermines party political interest. But you must also remember the government is got its hands tied. There are almost 11 court cases as we speak that strike at the heart of some of the key government decisions that have been taken. So it's quite a contested terrain and a difficult situation as we speak. How the government is going to move in dealing with service delivery at local level when there's a court order that has given civil society the power to run some of the municipal utilities makes one wonder where we're going.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you for talking to us. Modidima Mannya, discussing some of the issues surrounding the sixth administration as President Cyril Ramaphosa, government leaders, including ministers and deputies, premiers, director generals, leadership of SOGA, and all of the ministers hold a two-day Cabinet Lekgotla.